Hello my friends and welcome back to another episode of Radical Radio Scotland. Today we're chatting with Hannah from The Guts of It. So Hannah is the founding editor of The Guts of It, which is a magazine for radical ideas on healthcare. The first issue is due to publish sometime in the near future, but in the meantime, why don't you check out their Twitter, which is at The Guts of It. So Hannah is also a volunteer bike mechanic with an organisation called Bikes for Refugees. Now, I never even knew this organisation existed, but how lovely is that? Isn't that just so nice? But yeah, we talk about that on this podcast episode. Now, before I go any further, I do have to alert you all that the audio when I'm speaking on this is quite shite. And what I mean by that is sometimes when I'm speaking in this episode, there's this kind of wee static beep noise, like beep, 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 kind of noise. And yeah, it's just a real pain in the arse. So I do apologise for that, but thankfully it is only when I'm speaking, and it's only some of the time as well. So at least none of Hannah's fantastic words are lost. It is kind of only mine. I have spoke to my IT guy about it. He's kind of informed me that I do need to upgrade my headphone setup from just plugging it straight in the audio jack to getting a USB connection, because apparently it's less likely that they'll go beep if I use a USB connection instead of a audio jack. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's 2022. I should know about these things, but apparently I don't. But by the time you're hearing this anyway, the issue's resolved, so don't even worry about it. Just don't sweat it, sweet child of mine. It's sorted. Now, as ever, you can always support this podcast by giving us 5 stars, if that's what you want to do. If you think we're worthy of 5 stars, see if you think we're worthy of 1 star. See if this beep really annoys you. Give me 1 star. Go. I really don't want you to though, but I don't want you to lie either. You know, I want you to be honest about the quality of the podcast, you know. But at the same time, I want you to consider other things like the quality of conversation, the quality of people we're having on. You know, we've got these wonderful people on all the time producing these conversations with local activists, campaigners, and just people of interest to the left, you know. So yeah, you know what, you do you, but just make it 5 stars. But if you don't want to make it 5 stars, don't say it, you know. That's what my mum always said. She said, if you don't get anything nice to say, then don't say it, you know. So just bear that in mind. Don't let my mum down. That's all I'm saying. Now, if you wish to support us monetarily, if you think we're that good that we deserve some of your money, then you can always just find our PayPal in the description. Or, alternatively, you can join our Patreon, where you can get early access to episodes, join our Discord. Everybody's doing it. Honestly, it's jumping. You're missing out if you don't. www.patreon.com/Radical Radio Scotland. Now, with all of that said, let's just move on to today's podcast. Everybody, please put your hands together for Hannah. Yeah, Hannah, thank you so much for coming on to chat to us today. I really do appreciate it.
No worries.
So you recently set up The Guts of It, which is a magazine for radical ideas on healthcare. Well, I say recently, I was looking at it, it says it was March 2021 that the Twitter account was set up, but it was only kind of launched recently.
Yeah, that was, I mean, the Twitter account wasn't even necessarily used for that for a while. I just wanted something, I wanted a separate account to my normal one where I like followed healthcare-y, degrowthy, kind of had like a more specific kind of focus on my Twitter feed.
Yeah.
Because I'm not able to, between all the jokes and DJs on my other one, wanted something a bit more serious. But yeah, it actually has been something that I've been thinking about for quite a while, but I was working in healthcare and doing a course at the time, so I didn't have like a huge amount of free time, but I'm currently on a year out from that course, so thought it'd be a good time to get some wheels turning.
Yeah. So could you tell us a bit more about the concept of it and what you kind of hope to achieve with The Guts of It?
I suppose it happened, like, obviously I think there's been a lot of like, I mean, it might just be because like my mind is focused on this and I like more like I'm going to start to notice these things a little bit more, like a little bit of like confirmation bias, but it feels like there's a lot more talk, especially like because of the pandemic, around caring and like the care crisis and stuff like that. And I think when I started working in the NHS, which was I just like became a care worker, lost my job, was duly made redundant when the pandemic started. So then got a job as a carer for the NHS. And I've been interested in working for the NHS for a while, but when I started, I was like, oh, this isn't the strange like socialist behemoth that everyone kind of like puts it up to be. And it was quite interesting to me to like work within it. And I'm a bank healthcare support worker, so that means I work like all over all over across like NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. So you get to know so many different wards and so many different, not even just wards, but like so many different areas. And then through that, I started doing a course to be an operating department practitioner, which is effectively kind of nursing staff who work in operating theatres. And then from being a student nurse, and I think my eyes were open to like a lot of, yeah, a lot of things where you're like, whoa, like this is how it all works. That's not ideal. And again, I think my own focus comes from like an interest in kind of degrowth and like the Anthropocene, and a lot of kind of like climate change and how that all slots into it. And I think oftentimes there isn't any overlap, or if there is, it's like a little staff group who are trying to promote recycling, and there doesn't seem to be any. Of course there will be, but like there's just like endless waste and a lot of it would be. I'm just interested in how degrowth and healthcare could merge. So I think that was my interest. Also, sorry, this is such a rambling answer. I had kind of been like, oh, maybe I'll go and do a PhD, and then I was like, nah, I know like so many people I was like, I hated academia when I was within it. I think potentially, don't at me if I go back to it eventually, but at the time I wasn't interested in academia. I did a master's degree in biomedical engineering. And I was like, no, get me out. I'm done, never again. And so when I was like, oh, maybe I'll do a PhD, I was like, okay, actually, you're interested in reading and writing about this stuff. You're not interested in kind of being part of academia or becoming a researcher. Maybe in the future you will be, but if your interest is in reading and writing about this stuff, why not just do that yourself? Why not just edit things yourself? Why not read more? Why not try and write more, and do that independent of the institution? So yeah, that's why I started it. Also for other people who maybe felt the same, wanted to explore things, wanted to write in, doesn't necessarily have to be formal, but in a exploratory way about healthcare and radical ideas.
Yeah. So I was reading the replies to the tweet that launched it. And one of them, I know it was like someone just looking for work, but it was someone replied and they were based in New York. And I was just wondering, like, obviously, because the times we live in, you've got like social media, and these things can have such a massive reach. Is this a kind of project that's focused in Scotland, the UK, or is it something that you see you want contributions from all over?
Yeah, I definitely would want contributions from all over. I mean, obviously, I live in Glasgow. I've lived here for nearly 8 years, which is a bit nuts. A lot of my friends, a lot of the people that I've kind of come into contact with in this time are from Glasgow or work within the NHS. A lot of the contributions I've had so far are based from people who work within the NHS, but that's not the scope of it. I mean, the idea is like radical solutions and ideas, and those can come from like, other communities around the world. I think diverse voices are where people coming together and exploring different things. So I've actually reached out to a friend of mine who lives in Kenya, and he had a friend who worked on a project called People's Vaccine Kenya, about kind of like vaccine disparities between, the West and then the global South, and just trying to kind of get into that, because there was this like tendency on the left in Scotland, I feel, to be like, vaccines at all costs, this is so good. But when you had like healthy teenagers getting their first vaccination, and it often was like at the expense of more vulnerable people globally. I think that's an interesting conversation to have. So yeah, no, I'm definitely reaching out to people further afield, and I do hope it grows and has this kind of like, yeah, maybe an international audience. I mean, I'm happy if it's completely just Scotland based. It doesn't, as long as the ideas are interesting.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of an interesting point that you raise as well about the kind of vaccine inequality, because it's definitely something that's not discussed. I think in like Haiti just now, it's only 1% of the adult population is fully vaccinated.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because I was working in some of the vaccination, like as a healthcare support worker, and like the kind of, we did this one day where we vaccinated maybe like 5,000 people, I think, in the SECC, and there was television cameras, and it was quite a moving thing to be part of. And it was like interesting to see the NHS be mobilized in that way, quite firsthand. But when that kind of like wave of like pride in the NHS goes beyond kind of like prioritizing who globally needs vaccinated, then it's worth looking at. I think there was a very interesting program on AstraZeneca on BBC, which actually went into this and kind of really exposed like I can't remember the name of the program now, but Britain, donated money to developing vaccines for people who weren't from these kind of like Western nations. And the idea was, it was kind of like they would put money into that pot so that the vaccines would get developed. And it was like a little clause in it where it was like, oh, if you want some of the vaccines back later, then you can get them. And no other country that had like contributed took any vaccines, but Britain was like, yeah, give us all these vaccines, which and I mean, yes, technically that was a clause in it, but it was just like that kind of attitude that was taken by the government in terms of like vaccinating everyone here at all costs was an interesting point to be raised. I mean, yeah, I think that was definitely worth watching. It's quite interesting, that documentary.
So you touched on this a bit earlier, but on your website as well, you were talking about how there were situations that you found yourself in within the healthcare system that helped kind of develop your radical left post-growth approach to healthcare. Could you tell us a bit about some of these situations, what kind of fueled these thoughts, and ultimately the creation of this magazine?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're a healthcare worker, and like especially being a bank healthcare worker, and I've been reading a lot about different things like this, like NHS PLC, Alison Pollock, and a really, really interesting voice, I think. And she's been putting in the work for a long time. That was kind of touching on bank and agency staff. So as a bank healthcare worker myself, I could recognize that. So I just, I've got a little app and I click the shifts I want to do and I cover whatever ward needs it. I don't have like a set ward that I go to all the time. So, you'd show up, you don't know necessarily, you're not that familiar with the area, you're happy to help, but you don't know the patients, you don't have rapport with them, you don't know, even things like you don't know what they're going to eat, you don't know what they like in their tea, you don't know anything about their family or their life, and this like lack of continuity in care can be felt quite keenly. Like obviously I'm there and I do the work that needs done, I help people with personal care, help them with the dinners, whatever, and fetching things from the nurses and that, and like I don't think that I shouldn't be there, but without this kind of continuity of care, you feel like people get frustrated because they're having to repeat themselves and they're coming into contact with people that they don't know, that they don't have a relationship with, and I think that's obviously not ideal, especially when it turns to agency staff who are paid, it's like an external company and they're paid more, and it's just, and a lot of the time they can't even work in their own, if they're employed by the NHS in one health board, then they have to do agency work in a different health board, so they're driving a long way to get paid more to do care for people who they have no relationship with and will never see again. And it's like, of course you can't resent people like trying to get paid more in an industry where like it's really definitely not the best working conditions, or so it's interesting how this all plays in, and like I think noticing yourself like in your own work and seeing how that could be improved, that's quite interesting. So beyond the lack of continuity in care, which should just be addressed by like better hiring policy, better conditions for lower paid healthcare support workers and nurses across the board, better breaks, better your classic labor labor needs. That, and then a certain kind of attitudes amongst colleagues. And I mean, you can't go in somewhere and expect everyone to have the same politics as you, but there's certain kind of like, sometimes just hearing stuff in the staff room that would make you wince, and like even and in certain surgeries, and I don't know, that a kind of like attitude that maybe you wouldn't expect to see. And maybe part of me setting up this magazine was trying to find other people who felt similarly on that front. So like trying to find the people within healthcare who do share my politics or like share a vision for improvement.
Yeah. So it seems like all these kind of issues that you're speaking about are just systemic issues. Do you know what I mean? That we're not going to be sit here and slag individual staff or whatever, because they're obviously doing what they can to survive in the system. But these issues do seem really systemic. And I think that, well, do you think that greater unionisation would help deliver these changes that you want to see?
I think unions are quite well, like I think most people that I actually came across were unionized, but maybe there's a certain I think in healthcare there's a certain martyrdom, there's a certain like you've got to put up with it, you've got to like, it's just part of it. I think especially being a student, there was a lot of like, I had a ridiculous situation where the course that I was doing was 35 hours a week of placement, 4 weeks off a year. We weren't entitled to the nursing bursary, so I was just maybe getting £500 a month of a student loan, which obviously would have to pay back eventually, plus having to do work in that time, plus to make ends meet, I was doing bank shifts at the weekend. So I was working about 60-hour weeks in the hospital, and everyone was like, I was trying to be like, this is really unsustainable. Also, it was that only occurred in Glasgow, in like the Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board. So everyone else on my particular course was getting paid a salary to do it, and quite a high one. So anyway, I was trying to be a bit like, this situation is nuts and it's burning me out, and like I can't see how this is acceptable. And people are like, oh, I know it's terrible. Oh, I know. Oh God, when I was a student nurse, I worked for 90 days without a day off, or like, I don't, there's a certain kind of like, it's so terrible and we must keep going with it. Whereas I was trying to be like, it's so terrible and we shouldn't put up with it. So I think there's maybe, just a certain kind of martyrdom to healthcare, and like, and especially when the work that you do, it's not like working in a shop, which I've also done. You go home and like, no one's gonna die. Whereas if you don't do a good job in healthcare, people are gonna die. It's true, and they're gonna have worse health outcomes. So there is, there's that kind of like responsibility, which I think makes certain aspects of unionization within hospitals quite difficult, because there is this kind of martyrdom, there is this like patient safety aspect. Not that I mean, I think that there's great power in the union, but there are a lot of like different approaches that people, and different mindsets that people have that come together, especially when you're dealing with the health of other people.
Yeah, it seems like a very like counterintuitive mindset to have towards healthcare. Like, if you can't look after yourself, how can you trust the level of care that you're going to be giving to other people?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and you see that people who are stressed out and tired, I just, these aren't isolated incidents. I think it's like nearly every ward that I worked on had people who were all the nurses are staying late and getting, unpaid, having to finish their work. It's like dangerous staffing levels. Like I know places where every single shift, there's something called a DATIX form. So kind of like when there's been like an incident, you have to report this thing, through the system called a DATIX. I'm not, I know wards where every single shift the sister will, the nurse in charge will put in a DATIX about low staffing levels, because that's like a dangerous thing for the patients. And it's like, if you're reporting that every single shift and nothing's getting done, I myself have been on boards where I've been the only healthcare worker, and there's been maybe, I don't know, me to 30 patients or so.
Wow.
So anyone who is needing, any personal care, I'm doing all the lunches and stuff, and like it stresses you out to the point, especially me as a bank worker, where I can choose what wards I go back to. I'm going to look at that ward and be like, oh, that time that I was there, it felt dangerous and it felt wrong, and I couldn't do a good job. I wasn't able to spend time with people properly. People were left in situations that they shouldn't have been for too long. That was stressful and bad. And because I have a choice in where I work, I don't go back there, because it was dangerous. But then no one else is filling those shifts, you know what I mean? So you're always aware. It's, yeah. These are moments where it's very, keenly felt that it's a hard job when you're having to make those decisions where you're like, that was, labor conditions there were really bad. There weren't enough staff on, but therefore these patients are suffering, and I'm choosing not to go back to that ward.
Yeah. It seems like these kind of issues are, like you say, so dangerous. And I feel like there's just this kind of consensus on the left anyway, that because the NHS is technically free at point of use, that we've kind of taken it as far left as we possibly can. But just from what you're saying there, it sounds like that is not the case. But I was wondering if you could speak a bit more to
that. Yeah, I mean, I think my first kind of interesting, like, oh, this isn't like the leftist heaven I was promised, was the distinct hierarchy between healthcare workers and nurses and doctors. It's like, and sometimes, of course you get doctors from like maybe the class lens is like not the most appropriate at all times, but there is this kind of like, difficult hierarchy there that is like strange to navigate sometimes. A sort of deference to doctors, or like, there's a lot of wards where like I wouldn't even be spoken to by a doctor. That's not true of every single department.
Wow.
But that can be quite interesting. I would be completely ignored because I'm in my healthcare support worker uniform, which marks me out as something else. And even so, when I work in theatres, I wear scrubs, so I'm not wearing my uniform that marks me out as a band 2. That's another thing. Everyone gets described as their pay grade. So someone's like, get the band 2 to do that, or I'm a band 5. And it's true. I mean, that's also not isolated. Like, it's very much people are talked to and addressed by what they get paid, which is really strange. But yeah, when I'm wearing scrubs, for example, I get treated differently by people, and it's quite interesting. These like, because they think that I'm a doctor, so even if I'm like in the canteen, I get treated differently by people, because I'm not wearing my uniform. So I think those kind of like interpersonal things that are very strange within the system. And especially when things are improved, when there's direct communication between all people, like A&E is somewhere where doctors and nurses and healthcare support workers have quite good interaction, I feel. So when I do shifts at A&E, and a doctor will be like, oh, can you get this? And I can tell them something, and it's just a lot more cohesive, and I think patients get better care because of it, because there's not that divide. So I think that aspect was interesting to me when I started as a support worker. And also Yeah, I think like I don't know how far I take this. I'm not sure if I'm like mandatory, everyone needs to do like care work, mandatory like state like I'm not sure how much of a kind of like statist I am, but I find it interesting when people go to the job center and they're looking for jobs and it's like, oh, well, have you thought about being a security guard at Superdrug in Govan? And it's like, I think maybe there should be a little bit more, you know, um allowance to get people into working in healthcare, because I've actually, of course, there are these moments where it's like stressful and it's not good, but I think the contract is pretty good. It's the best contract I've ever been on. You get double pay on Sundays, you get, you know, an hour of holiday pay accumulated for every 8 hours you worked. Of course, there's like a lot of things that can be improved, and I'm used to like kind of maybe service industry jobs where a lot of time didn't even have a contract. So this to me, I'm like, wow. But I think I think healthcare can be like a really interesting and good thing to get into. Also, obviously, like I started doing the course, so I'm getting trained up. So I think a kind of recruitment, yeah, I think it's like a recruitment issue. Like staffing levels need to be improved, nursing needs to be, and I think people are put off by nursing because when you start working it's really, really stressful, but if there was like adequate staffing levels it wouldn't be so stressful. It would actually be a very fulfilling job. So it's kind of this difficult thing where maybe people don't want to get into it because it's like not as well paid for what you're doing. A lot of the time people within healthcare kind of compare it with like other public sector jobs. So like teaching is like better paid than, like, you know, a teacher will be better paid than a nurse, etc. So, well, and I've seen a lot of people, I mean, this is anecdotally, but I, in my time, seen a lot of people who started off being nurses, then moving into teaching and quitting the nursing profession to become a teacher, largely because of yeah, the rate of pay and the like slightly lower responsibility. So I think if the responsibility was like properly remunerated, and if staffing levels were better, yeah, addressed, then I think that it would all make nursing, you know, something to aspire to, which I think it should be.
Yeah. So you were talking about earlier about like the different hierarchies within the NHS, and I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of just an issue that's replicated across most of society. Do you know what I mean? Like you get that
Yeah.
in kind of every line of work. But how integral do you think is rebalancing these hierarchies in a kind of in a healthcare setting?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the articles that has been submitted to the magazine so far, I was kind of maybe going to try and get it all compiled by the end of March. Who knows? The first one can come out when it comes out. Anyway, but one of the things that has been submitted was written by a doctor, and within it, he says we should pay, you know, we should pay nurses, healthcare support workers, you know, auxiliary staff, and doctors. Everyone should get paid the same. And I was like, I mean, here's me being like, I'm gonna set up this radical thing. And then I read that sentence and I was like, whoa, wow. And I've been like, that's been playing on my mind a little bit. I'm like, I find that really interesting because, you know, nursing and you know, and medicine, they're different. There's different skills to them, you know. It's not necessarily one's better than the other. I think there's nurses do things that doctors can't do. I think that's true. Obviously not every nurse, obviously not every doctor, but you know what I mean. There's different skill sets, and I think also making it easier to get into medicine. So there's a kind of ceiling, you know. There's a little bit of like you kind of come in as a healthcare support worker, but then it's not super easy. There's maybe starting to be a little bit of things like they've got things called advanced nursing practitioners, which you can do from nursing. You go on and you basically become kind of like, you have the authority maybe of like a junior doctor or whatever, but it's like there's always a line, there's always a like, you can never become a doctor kind of thing. Whereas I think even in like companies and that kind of thing, there's more like, oh, maybe if you work hard enough, you know, which I obviously don't agree with, but then there can always be an aspiration to the top. Whereas here there's like, and of course it can be, I mean, nothing's stopping anyone from going to uni for 7 years, except obviously, you know, the obvious financial burdens there, but maybe, I don't know, maybe some kind of like integration so that that could be possible, if people were interested. And just, yeah, kind of better communication. I think stopping describing people by their pay grades would be a great start. Like, that is really kind of whack. Yeah, I
I
know.
can't think of another like industry where I've ever heard of that.
Yeah, it was funny because you look really like surprised when I mentioned that first. So I was like, yeah, actually, that is weird, isn't it? Like, yeah, and you kind of, yeah. I think in a way that is useful and is a little bit comes from some of the unionizing that nursing staff have had, where their roles and responsibilities are quite well defined. So like, they're able to be like, I can't do that, this is the level that I go to, and I'm not covered basically by like the NMC if I do this thing. So there's kind of like their roles and responsibilities are like much more outlined, so that there's a lot of like fear of litigation in the NHS. So there's they can be like, I can't do this. Whereas a friend of mine who's a doctor was talking to me about that, and she was saying that can be hard as a doctor, but you can't say that. You just have to do it. Even as a junior doctor, if something has to happen and you're not trained in it and you don't have the experience, but all the nurses on the floor who have more experience than you, or have been in the profession for longer than you, are saying, I can't do this, then you have to take that responsibility on yourself. So I don't know, it's quite, in some ways this, and so in some ways it's kind of like very defined. I'm a band 2, I don't do that. I'm a band 3, I don't do that. Can be helpful so that people don't cause harm to patients. But yeah, other times it's really, really strange how this kind of like, how you're described by how much you earn.
Yeah. So just going back to, sorry, one sec, I just need to cough.
No, it's fine.
Just going back to that article that was submitted, that you're saying that doctor was saying that everyone should just get paid the same. Obviously, I don't want to try and give too much away, but what was his reasonings for that? Because like you were saying, that does seem a bit mental, that because there are such different skill sets.
Yeah, but I think like, when I say different skill sets, I mean maybe then you would have people who are like doing medicine because they were interested in that particular skill set, and I think everyone should be paid the same and more across the board, you know what I mean? Like, because I think some people could then, when I first heard it, I was like, that is a completely, really, I've never crossed my mind. But then exploring it a little bit more, I'm like, there are many different kind of aspects to, and the responsibilities that you have, etc. Like, but to medicine that, yeah, I don't know. I was like, maybe if people actually cared about what they were doing, would accept that. And if they, it would get people who are more interested. But I mean, that is, anyway, whatever. It's radical. We're pushing the boat out. And he didn't even necessarily go into it in huge detail, but just like put that there, and it kind of, I find it quite an interesting thought experiment sometimes when I'm cutting about, and be like, what would that mean? Who would get into medicine? And why? Motivations for people. Because I think at the moment a lot of it is, you're clever, and you're clever, and you go to a school where it wouldn't be weird for you to try and aspire to do medicine. It's kind of seen as like, I think it's really nuts to me that people decide to do that when they're 17, based on some kind of like, oh, I'm quite smart and I go to a school where that is a possibility that's been put to me. I mean, even in my school, when I was in Ireland, I knew a friend of mine who went to the guidance counsellor, and she said, yeah, I want to do medicine. And the guidance counsellor said, you mean nursing? So I was like, so somewhere where that wouldn't have been met with that response, being in a school where your aspirations aren't met with that response, I think is a big part of it. And that's kind of obviously really weird. Yeah, so addressing like how people maybe get into it in the first place could be quite interesting.
Yeah. So I guess that comes down to really class inequalities.
And there are schemes where it's like they try and help people get into medicine who are from like working class backgrounds. And I know doctors who are from working class backgrounds, but yeah, kind of encouragement, or yeah, I think like it's obviously a very like well respected position. I don't know if in Bullshit Jobs, I don't know if you read that, David Graeber.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of the ones where the correlation between how bullshit the job is and how much you get paid is like, that's quite an outlier as medicine, because it's obviously not a bullshit job and you get paid quite well. So I think maybe it's aspirational in that sense, and like all jobs should be like that. They should all be paid well and they should all be meaningful. So I suppose maybe even just like trying to bring nursing and care work up to that level, rather than maybe devaluing the work of medicine, is perhaps what this doctor who wrote that article was suggesting. But
Yeah.
I find it a very interesting way to think about things.
Yeah, no, that sounds interesting as well, because usually that's like one of the arguments against kind of leftist projects, like, oh, you just want everyone to be paid the same. But to hear it actually be proposed, I've not heard it be proposed from the left in a long time, but I'm definitely interested to read that article. I think as well, I would like to talk about kind of, I don't know if you have any experience with this in terms of healthcare, but like just how the mental health crisis is kind of at where it's at. I think everyone has a kind of personal connection to people that have been affected by it at the very least. But do you have any kind of ideas of how we deal with the mental health crisis within healthcare? Or do you think that it's probably better off to try and adjust society as a kind of whole?
Yeah, let's just fix society first. But yeah, the way in which like healthcare and mental health interacts, I think when I have seen it most keenly, I mean, it's hard. It's such a wide-reaching topic. I'm like drawing on like, I think every patient in hospital needs, more support than they get, and it can be a really like isolating place. So just even thinking like from a ward work perspective, I don't think it's addressed enough, especially in elderly care. I think so many people who are in hospital as elderly people have really awful mental health problems, and depression and loneliness, and that can be really hard to see. And I don't think that I don't think that geriatric care is done very well in this country at all. But even beyond that, I think some more of the more acute things that I've seen, within receiving wards and within, I'm such a spy, man, like doing this bank healthcare work, I'm everywhere, I'm like checking out all the departments, but within kind of like acute things like the receiving wards and in A&E, there's just not the capacity for people to be able to help people. I've seen people come in and they come to A&E in order to try and access help, but it's help that doesn't exist. They're trying to get services that maybe have been defunded, or they're like, I just need to be readmitted to this potentially like alcohol unit, and someone's like, oh, we can't do that, it's got to be this person. And people are just kind of reaching this desperate level, and they come up against desperate staff who don't have the time and the resources to, and there aren't enough kind of even like mental health practitioners to be able to deal with that, because they can be like extremely complex needs on a more acute level. But even on a less acute level, and people who, I think, I don't know, I'm very much like society, man, like just how we're made to work, how, I don't know, I mean, can I necessarily be like the way our phones and the way everything is like worked, and the way that 0 hours contracts and the cost of living and all these like little pressures, I think, really affecting people to the point that when it does become an acute problem, then the NHS can't handle that properly. Yeah, I don't honestly. I'm not the person to have the solution to all of these pressure points coming together. So I think, yeah, overhaul of society for that one.
Yeah, but I think it'll be. I'm definitely sure that your magazine will be producing articles on that shortly. I'm sure that you'll
Yeah,
get loads
I
of
think
submissions
just,
about that.
yeah, I hope so. And I think just like trying to have like, yeah, I think part of like trying to set up the magazine was for people to have space to read about these kind of ideas and to envision things, and like even by, I think also just another reason why I was interested in doing it specifically about healthcare was I think there's like a lot of like lefty stuff within maybe fashion or music and these other things that have like magazines, but healthcare isn't seen as particularly sexy is the wrong word, but like people sometimes I don't think it applies to them. You know, they're like, oh, I've never been in a hospital or whatever. But it's like, I think a healthy healthcare system would have such far-reaching, an impact on everyone basically. So trying to alert people to the fact that like their lives do come up against healthcare all the time, and like and that these leftist ideas, if people have an idea that like if these things are possible or spoken about, and just have more people thinking about that and thinking about how they interact with the NHS and what the point of it is. Because I was always like, oh, I love the NHS. Like whenever I do something silly and like break a bone, and then I go and the nurses are really nice and like it's so good. And then being within it, you just recognize that like how much a thriving NHS could benefit so much of the population, that I think like at least friends of mine on the left like kind of like aim to work towards, you know, people who are in poverty or in jobs that are 0 hours, or like who are affected by the energy crisis, etc., and who are affected by mental health. I think if mental health, everyone's affected by mental health, but who have mental health issues, then yeah, I think trying to kind of like alert people to the fact that healthcare is extremely relevant to all of us was part of the reason for me setting it up as well.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been looking into more, and even just kind of researching questions and stuff for this as well, is like just the Zapatista project in Mexico. I don't know how familiar you are with them, but they're like just massive on kind of building these autonomous structures. And I was looking into how their kind of healthcare system works in regards to that. So one of the practices that they've put at the forefront of their healthcare system is that people are to be treated with respect for their dignity, culture, beliefs, and using their own language. In your own experience, like how much is this lacking within our current setup, and kind of how big a role does gender, race, and kind of perceived social norms around sexuality kind of play in determining the kind of level of care that a patient receives?
I think that, I mean, there was recently a really interesting project on how COVID affected, like, well, that, I mean, I suppose that's a little bit more like non-white nurses and healthcare staff. Just a really interesting kind of project about how that affects people who work within the system who aren't white, or who are, you know, non-conforming or marginalized in another way. I think obviously, you know, there's really horrific statistics about how, you know, there's a higher mortality rate for Black mothers, things like that. So I think like systemically you can see that it is an issue. And yeah, like you said, like non-conforming in terms of like sexuality and gender. I mean, like the lack of trans healthcare in this country is, you know, pretty appalling and leads to some kind of desperate measures, I think, sometimes. And yeah, and I think like a lot of the time, so systemically it's obviously an issue, and you can see that from statistics, and but it's also maybe that comes just from like individuals as well. You know, it's like not everyone, not every single nurse ever, not every single healthcare professional ever is like rude or dismissive, or but it's like definitely just a kind of cultural thing. Or yeah, you're in the staff room and the punchline of someone's joke is that like, oh, it turns out they were transgender, and you're like, like, trying to kind of challenge that in the staff room yourself, especially as a student, or especially as like a bank staff, when you're not necessarily like in that context all the time. And I think these kind of individual moments which maybe reflect a kind of how broader society sometimes feels about things, can be, yeah, because people don't separate, their own emotions and their own feelings from their work. But then when that has an effect on people's health, and there's, you get training about respecting people's dignity. That is definitely a part of, I mean, my training as a student, it's been part of that. And yeah, you get taught how to different issues with like when people kind of maybe present and they don't speak English, and there are like, it's not that it's like, oh, whatever. Like it's definitely being addressed. Like you have to treat people with dignity, and you have to treat people with respect. That's part of what's taught. But then I think you don't necessarily like witness that all the time. So I don't know if there could be a better like complaints process or something. But yeah, it's definitely, or if it could be forefronted more, maybe that could be beneficial. Because yeah, similar to the Zapatistas, I was reading a really, really interesting book. One of the most interesting books I came across when I decided to start reading everything I could get my hands on about like leftist healthcare projects, was a book about, actually, yeah, it's just on my shelf. I'm gonna pick it up just so that I can read the title. I think it's called For Health Autonomy, but just so I got this in the radical or the anarchist bookshop in London, in the East End. So it's called For Health Autonomy, Horizons of Care Beyond Austerity, Reflections from Greece. And it's by a group called the Care Notes Collective. And this was really, really interesting. It was talking about different clinics that were set up in Greece in response to the financial crash. And basically one of the most interesting things that I found was, and it was good because it wasn't theoretical. I think I've said that in the magazine, that I want it to be solutions based, not people just talking about problems, or, oh, this is bad in the healthcare system, this is bad. It's like, okay, like what can be done? I'm interested in like solutions. So this was like discussing what had been done, and it's talking about like the different clinics that were set up, how they ran, but it's also reflecting on them and like highlighting like difficulties or the problems that they had. For example, like in Greece, maybe some of these clinics didn't have so many like refugees attending, and how can you like get everyone together? But part of the clinics was about when you first went, they completely got rid of the like patient professional kind of dichotomy. It was like when you went, you had a little meeting, and it was 3 people. So there was you were with a physician, like a medic, and somebody who worked in like mental health, so either a psychologist or a therapist or a mental health nurse, and either a lay person or someone else who could have been like a radiographer or a care worker or just some other kind of healthcare professional. And with that, they built a picture of your social background, your health background, kind of took the holistic picture into consideration, and then through that could help you with your health, with your healthcare outcomes. Because I think sometimes when you strip people of their background and you just treat a symptom or you treat a condition, you're not allowing for like the complex needs that they might have in their social life and their home life. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Like once you have a better view of somebody's like entire situation, you can treat them better. That could be something, I think, that if that was integrated better within the NHS, or indeed globally, then there'd probably be better outcomes and less less prejudice against people and better outcomes for marginalized people.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting book. I might need to read that.
Yeah, very welcome to borrow it. It's pretty short.
But yeah, I think that's one of the important things to note as well about kind of leftist healthcare is that like, these kind of projects already exist, and we don't just have to like you said, just sit and talk about all the problems, because I feel like the problems are pretty well documented by now. I mean, we've just went through a horrific pandemic. We're still in a horrific pandemic. Like these problems are pretty at the forefront, and everyone kind of knows about them. So yeah, you're definitely right to kind of shift attention towards solutions, like you say, and that's what I was doing when I was like looking up kind of stuff to talk about and this, and then obviously I was looking at kind of leftist healthcare projects that exist already. So I was looking at Cuba, and obviously Cuba, their healthcare project is unbelievable in comparison to the kind of GDP and everything, and compared to what we do for the world, compared to what Cuba do, it's mad. I mean, they send more medical personnel to the developing world than all of the G8 combined, which is just madness. What could we learn from kind of Cuba's healthcare solidarity, and what, or like positive and negative, because obviously Cuba has its own problems, but yeah, what could we just learn from that kind of solidarity, but also in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the focus on healthcare is really important. I think kind of like placing a lot of importance on that in society, is obviously really has really done wonders for like medicine in Cuba. I think in terms of kind of international solidarity, I think there's an issue with NGOs where, I think a lot of it is like, I'm going to go and help and then leave. I think people go into it for like very, very good reasons. But I think that kind of like helping, leaving causes more harm than good ultimately, maybe not in individual cases, but overall. There's certain things where people try and, which I don't think is necessarily like Cuba's approach to it, but I think it's maybe like a kind of British or Western approach to it. And like there's people who try to challenge that a little bit. Say, for example, what's his name? I also got David Knott. He has I was like looking and I've got the book on the shelf. Can't say I haven't been doing my homework. And he basically sets up kind of, so he was working for MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, in Syria. And he ended up setting up his own foundation that trains local surgeons and works with local people, because I think he found that there was this kind of like entering, leaving, certain things that like British doctors couldn't do, whereas they would like leave the doctors who are the local people to like a worse fate maybe when they all like left. So he kind of tries to train people in well, especially in, so he's a surgeon, so he's trying to like train people especially in like kind of wartime surgery and like emergency surgeries and that kind of thing. So I think and then let them like go on to train other people, and he recognized the work and the skill of local people. So I think something that like, I mean, empowers local people is definitely a buzzword, but something that empowers like local healthcare workers, rather than, you going in and helping people, helping patients valuable for the patient at the time, but doesn't have like a long-term impact. So I think this kind of like almost volunteerism aspect of it should be addressed, so that like you have better long-term outcomes for places that need additional healthcare.
It doesn't really set up any kind of structures to continue that healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you do have people who work in healthcare already in these countries, you know, and could probably better direct what needs to happen there. You know?
Mm-hmm. So due to the US embargo on Cuba, like economic constraints have meant that their kind of healthcare system has had to incorporate alternative medicine and kind of herbal solutions to healthcare, just because it's simply cost effective. Do you think this is something that we can utilize in the West from kind of a degrowth perspective?
Yeah, I think that like there's so much. I think there's definitely room for that in terms of like, I don't know, don't let me get my big pharma tinfoil hat on, but there's like a lot to be said for kind of, I don't know, even placebo, or even like listening to somebody's interests and needs. Excuse me. So if you don't belittle like their beliefs, and you take on board that like they need a more kind of holistic approach. Again, it's kind of that like taking the entire person's background into consideration, which takes time and effort, and it could be, you know, again, it's all about staffing, isn't it? But it can like be improved by better staffing conditions. Then you can like spend more time like learning about what the patient needs. So if that's something that the patient is interested in, and if that's something that they value, I think that's really important. I've got friends myself who are quite involved in like herbalism. I think there's a sort of like that's not explicitly just like crusty, you know, like a sort of value to working with plants and understanding better like kind of historic, you know, because we didn't always have this kind of like level of medicines and the like local cures, and understanding your traditions, I think can be really important for people's health, because a lot of even, you know, physical kind of issues and diseases, there is such a mental element. I mean, I think a lot of the times like this is an organ and this is a separate organ and this is yet another organ and this does this function, whereas the body is such a complex thing that it can't be understated, like the role of like your mental health and how you think about things, and like, you know, your mental state and how you're treated and how you approach or how you are approached with therapies, you know. So if somebody is like, what are your interests, and if you feel valued and etc., and then I think, yeah, your outcomes are going to be better. So I think, yeah, if that takes into consideration kind of traditional medicines, then I am all for it.
Yeah, I don't want to say it's quite a privileged position to be able to sit and discuss that whilst they're actually having to do it because of an embargo, but I do also think that it kind of does have its place. I mean, we have had traditional medicines even here in Scotland for thousands of years. I don't know too much about them, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that nettle soup, stingy nettle soup and stuff like that is like, I just know that I've seen infographics about that.
I know, well, maybe if they start serving nettle soup instead of macaroni and cheese in the hospitals, everyone's be grand.
Yeah.
That's my radical solution, nettle soup in the hospital.
Get the article penned.
You give me ideas, man. But yeah, I think a more porous relationship to the two would be beneficial. And you know, I mean, I think a lot of the time I was reading this very interesting P.E. Muscovitz. They write a very good blog called Mental Health, like HELLTH. Recently published an article about kind of overprescribing of antidepressants, and someone that they had interviewed in that said something along the lines of like the way in which like mental health is treated. I think this is from an American perspective, but I think it's probably valid worldwide, is that, you know, you've got like a flashing light on the dashboard, you know, of your car, and then someone's like, you know, whatever, I hate cars, I know nothing about cars. And someone comes along and they just like, rather than fix the problem that's causing that light to flash, they just turn the light off.
Yeah.
And they're like, cool, look, it's not flashing anymore, but your problem isn't fixed, you know, no one's addressed like the underlying cause. So again, this is like a very large, like, we need to change society before, yeah, because otherwise it's just like these kind of, you're constantly treating it too late. You're constantly treating it by the time that the problem has arrived, rather than like preventing the problem from arising in the first place.
Yeah.
Which obviously, yeah, would be beneficial, and which could take into consideration like a lot more kind of traditional methods, or like just trying to suck people out of these like grim neoliberal lives that we all have to live.
Yeah, it's a bit like putting a bucket under a broken pipe instead of just fixing the pipe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So kind of leaving healthcare behind, sorry, you mentioned that you're a volunteer bike mechanic for Bike for Refugees. Could you tell us a bit about like how you became involved with them and what they do, what they've kind of achieved?
So I actually can't remember where I first heard of them. I think it was online somewhere. And I just applied to get involved, like, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or so, when I had more free time, having taken this year out from the course. So they are set up in Edinburgh and Scotland. So this is Bikes for Refugees Scotland. So they're set up in Edinburgh and Glasgow. And yeah, basically get donations in, and then volunteers fix up the donated bikes, and then distribute them to new Scots, so refugees and asylum seekers. And there's like there's a keenness there to get like new Scots involved as well, so as volunteers, and train them up. And so there's training available to get like bike mechanic qualifications, etc. So yeah, it's a nice thing to do. I think charities shouldn't exist. I think it's a shame that like the charity sector has to exist in the first place. But if I can be involved in giving free bikes to refugees and asylum seekers, and that's something, you know, I'm interested in active transport. I'm interested in like just provide like making sure that refugees are welcomed and have like as good a life as possible. I think especially in terms of the bikes, like that gives so much autonomy. I mean, even say last night, right, I had to get a train or a bus, and it was going to take like an extra half hour into my journey, and like, you know, trying to get anywhere on a Sunday night is impossible. And, you know, when I actually have my bike with me, I can get anywhere I want very, you know, cheap, healthy, easily. Sorry, I'm like extremely evangelical about cycling, one of those ones. But I think like being able to offer that independence, that autonomy, the kind of ease and like, and like kind of cheap form of transport, I think is really, really valuable. So, and especially so for refugees.
Yeah, that sounds like a really cool organization. And when you mentioned that, I just didn't want to not bring it up, because people should know that something like that exists. Have they been doing anything with refugees from Ukraine, or is that just a bit too soon?
No, I think I think there's work being done to, you know, to make people aware. I think trying to like integrate what Bikes for Refugees does with other organizations such as like the Unity Center, or like other places that are interacting and like kind of helping, maybe like refugee and stuff like that, just so that people are aware of the project. Yeah, unfortunately, I think there's like a really long waiting list, but the structure in the organization of bikes for refugees has changed a little bit. So hoping, because we've got loads of bikes,
Yeah.
so hopefully be able to like get them out to people really fast and people not have to wait. But yeah, I think basically any new Scot, and even they've actually started working with kind of like schools and schools in areas where, you know, they might have like a high percentage of kind of like refugees and asylum seekers, and basically saying, here, does anyone in this primary school need a bike, because we've got them, and that kind of thing. So kind of like going, like doing some outreach into areas and to organizations who might, you know, have people who would be interested in the program. And, you know, we give out like bikes to whole families sometimes, which is really nice, you know.
Yeah.
When the whole, you know, 4 or 5 people come and get a bike, is really good to be able to do. And then we'll offer like free repairs for people as well. So anyone who's gotten a bike for us, through us, could come back and get it repaired as well.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. That's class. And I also think that kind of wraps up everything that I wanted to talk to you about. Do you have anything that you want to shout out, or where can people find you and your projects?
Well, let me think. Maybe I should have thought about my shout outs earlier. Just thanks to anyone who's like gotten involved already or reached out to me. It's really encouraging, and it's really interesting to find people in your life who then also work in healthcare and you wouldn't even have known. And yeah, to everyone who's submitted and stuff. So I've currently got a website, which is thegutsofit.org. You can email me with any thoughts, concerns, clarifications, questions, article pitches at editor@thegutsofit.org, and then there's a Twitter account of the same name as well. And that's probably the only way to catch me.
Sweet.
Probably gonna have this first issue out, I'd like to say within the next month, and then this one is just quite a free for all. I was just interested in what came my way, and then hopefully probably have a bit more like deadlines and themes going into the future. So yeah, themes such as mental health or even like the future as a more broad concept.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Hannah. It was a great chat.
No worries. Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for reaching out.
That, my friends, was Hannah. Go show the guts of it and bike for refugees some love. And yeah, I hope that beep wasn't too annoying. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch yous after.